I didn't want a sequel to The Last of Us. The original game was this haunting tale of survival and the impact a shred of light can have on a jaded, broken person. That game did not need a sequel. The game had this ending that just felt like a perfect punch in the gut in all of the right ways. And for some context, I say this as a person that fucking adores the original game.
I love it! Come on, let's go!
And yet, here we are. The Last of Us Part 2 is out, and I honestly couldn't have been more wrong. The Last of Us 2 isn't perfect. I don't believe it's trying to be. It isn't looking to be this love letter to the original or even a consistent continuation of the themes from the original. It's a broken narrative about a broken person who's trying desperately to claw their way from the depths of hell. Ellie is hollow. Her choices are bad, and she isn't always rewarded the way you want her to be. It's deliberate. She's not Joel. She's 19 years old and as naive and rash and emotionally irresponsible as any teenager. This is just exacerbated by the fact that she's traveled to the ends of the earth to try to put back together pieces of her bloody broken heart. So, here is where the spoilers kick in. And before we dive into this, I feel like it must be said, if you haven't played this game, you are not entitled to participate within the Discord of the story.
What did you say?
What the team at Naughty Dog sought to do was to fundamentally focus in on this harrowing character study, on the effects of grief, revenge, and how hard it is to grasp onto the shreds of humanity that these characters have left. If this was a book and the plot leaked online, you're totally cool to jump in and hate the story. If this was a movie and the plot leaked online, by all means, jump on the dog pile. Video games are interactive. The strength of their stories are often dependent on the pieces of ourselves that we project onto these characters. And this game, more so than probably any other, relies on your own hatred, your own grief, and your own capacity to forgive. This is a story that can only be told using the medium of video games, and honestly, it elevates the industry as a whole as a result. Okay, spoiler time. Joel dies. Joel dies, and no, it's not a dignified hero's death. His leg, well, it used a shotgun shell, and his face kisses the cold metal of a golf club.
Fucking calm down, Greg. It's
Golf. It's golf.
fuck you, man.
You are Ellie in this moment, brimming with vitriolic anger and a very, very clear idea of your path forward. Whatever happens, you're going to kill Abby.
You're gonna fucking die!
And the wheels of the game spin into motion from here. Ellie's leaving the safety of Jackson, the community she's helped build for herself, and heads west, to Seattle, to Abby, and to revenge. But this game isn't about revenge. Not to its core, at least. This is a game about forgiveness, and the lengths we will go, all of the things we will do, before we're willing to forgive someone. Joel kills the surgeon, who we find out to be Abby's dad. Abby kills Joel, who's become like a father to Ellie. Ellie wants to kill Abby. Abby wants to kill Ellie. If this was where the game stopped, there would likely be a lot less complaining online, and frankly, we would all be robbed of a truly amazing experience. Thankfully, it isn't. Thankfully, we're forced to look at our actions. Thankfully, we have Abby. Now I, like many of you, fucking hated this. When I saw Seattle Day 1 creep onto the screen after this hulking woman just shot Jesse's face off, I was more than a little upset.
Oh, come on!
This decision is not meant to be met with applause. Not initially, at least. It wants you to groan and to question what the fuck were they thinking. But then, Naughty Dog does something unique. Treats you like an adult, asks you to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and see where this whole thing goes. If you're willing to surrender to the current a little bit, what you'll come to find is a story not about heroes and villains, but about broken people. I've read a bunch of articles and heard interviews where people say, yes, Ellie is the villain. Check it out, everyone, you play as the bad guy in the story. And I honestly couldn't think of a worse assertion. We're forced into the perspective shift strictly to prove that, no, there are no heroes and villains, just broken people doing terrible shit to each other, and we, as the player, are forced to reconcile with these decisions regardless of what the narrative says, the characters do, or how we feel about it. The single greatest example of this comes from the Ellie boss fight as Abby, in what could be the single greatest moment of,
You don't want no part of this shit.
after spending several hours playing as Abby, building your relationship with her, building your relationship with her friends, you know it's on borrowed time. These people will die, and Abby will confront Ellie, and you're faced with having to confront your own emotions. The game resumes and you've got to use Abby and just essentially kick the shit out of Ellie. I didn't want to do any of this. I wanted to put the controller down and, you know what, just let Ellie do her worst. But I kept moving, I kept fighting, each punch a reluctant button press, until the fight was finished. I was emotionally exhausted and just grateful that Ellie was still breathing, knowing fully well what it cost. Jesse is dead. Tommy, we suspect, is also dead. And Dina is balancing on the edge of a knife. And Ellie's completely shattered, but that's not where the game ends. Ellie continues to lose more and more, and this is where the story really fucking hits you. The most poetic shit about this game is born from the song that Joel sings at the start of the game.
If I ever were to lose you, I'd surely lose myself.
From what is essentially the opening moments of the game, we know where it ends. Ellie loses her family in Joel, her community in Jackson, her love in Dina, and her music. Literally everything that would breathe life into Ellie's soul is gone. The Ellie we know is gone. She walks off that beach a fragment of herself, held together by pain and the impact of her and Joel's bond, and essentially that's how the game leaves the player. The reason why this game is so heavily contended after all of this time is that we aren't left the same way we started. We didn't get what we want, and neither did Ellie. As a player, we want our actions to have agency. We want them to matter and make a difference. And we want to leave these experiences more whole than when we started them. The Last of Us Part 2 challenges us to be more, to expect more, and find empathy for those who do us harm, to understand the old expression that when you're out for revenge, it's probably best to dig two graves. And listen, I know I've just pumped this game's tires for the last, 7 minutes, but that's not to say that it's perfect. It makes a number of dumb narrative decisions like, why don't Dina and Ellie talk about her being immune after Dina finds out? Why doesn't Owen say to Ellie, yo, my girlfriend's super fucking pregnant, please don't kill her? Or why doesn't Abby and Ellie ever reference that Joel killed Abby's dad during one of their several interactions? Ultimately, these are super small flaws that don't particularly diminish the overarching point of the otherwise brilliant work, but it's important to say that there are flaws. The Last of Us Part 2 is a lesson in duality. It's done in the narrative with Ellie and Abby's 3-day cycle intersecting. When I say cycle, that doesn't sound like the right word. 3-day timeline. Their 3-day timeline intersects. It's done in the color palette with the use of dark blue and orange, which on its own probably deserves a whole fucking video. And it's done in the characters. As Ellie is continuing her path, losing her humanity, Abby's gaining hers. Abby's piecing herself back together, not through the catharsis of killing Joel, but through her bond with Lev, who, as a side note, if you have a problem with on the grounds of him being transgendered, then you can kindly
Lick my butthole.
Snap!
The absolute masterclass here is that Abby is crawling out of the hole that Ellie is currently digging for herself. Killing Joel didn't stop the nightmares Abby had. It didn't bring her dad back. She needed to give something, a piece of herself, to help somebody else. Ellie learns that lesson when she decides to let Abby live, and in that action, reclaims her humanity. If you left the end of this game super angry that Ellie didn't kill Abby, then congratulations.
You've missed the point entirely.
And that's not to say that it's your fault. This game was probably never going to please everyone. There's an extent to which you need to abandon what you want and realize what's in front of you. In that regard, we can all learn from this story. We aren't always dealt the hand we want, we may not react in ways that seem reasonable or the way other people would like us to, but we can all learn to try to find the good in each other, the shreds of light that pierce through, and regardless of our past actions, we can try to be a little bit better each day. That's what I hope, at least, but what the fuck do I know? I was wrong about not wanting The Last of Us Part 2.